I'm Dr. Charles Lawrie. I'm the co-founder and chief medical officer of FIOS Health. I'm also a high volume anterior approach hip replacement and robotic knee surgeon in Miami, Florida, consultant for several of the large orthopedic device companies, medical educator, and current president of the Anterior Hip Foundation.
So glad to have you with us, Charles. FIOS Health, your company, was founded on the idea that knowledge can be shared and scaled with almost no cost. For you, was there a specific moment or experience that made you realize that the real bottleneck in musculoskeletal care was information access rather than just patients being able to get into your clinic?
FIOS Health was really born out of a simple observation I made in my clinic. Patients don't struggle because their doctors don't care. They struggle because they don't have access to the information when they need it most. And the bottleneck in our care of our patients isn't just time in the clinic spent educating patients. It's actually for the patients access to timely and trusted knowledge. So, for me, that realization came, like I said, in my clinic, talking to my medical assistants, going over the hundreds of post-operative phone calls, portal messages, emails they get on a weekly basis, and realizing that most of those really came down to the same predictable questions. Things like, is this swelling normal? When can I walk without a cane? Can I shower after surgery? When can I drive? Every surgeon knows that, about 90% of these questions are routine, answerable. We probably answer them multiple times, even for each individual patients, despite the fact that we counsel them on this and give them information packets in the office. These questions can take up an enormous amount of time from clinical staff that could be spent doing other duties that might be more important for the patients. These questions also come from a real place in the patients. It creates a lot of anxiety for them, this perception of asymmetric knowledge that they have. We as surgeons forget that the patients are only going through this procedure one time, hopefully in their life, and they have these questions that they're genuinely concerned about. It was that aha moment. The problem wasn't the lack of expertise; it was the lack of scalable communication in the office. And FIOS really grew from that. The idea that knowledge could be shared, personalized, and scaled, to every patient instantaneously, in a way that websites or information packets or phone calls to the office or messages really can't do.
So that's a really ambitious sounding project. And one of the things that I'm curious about is it can be really daunting to tackle a whole bunch of new aspects of communication at once. Was there a particular problem that you were most determined to solve when you started FIOS?
So really the problem boils down to two things. One, on the provider side, we lack resources. We're all being squeezed by payers. We're all being told to do more with less. We're taking care of more patients. We're operating on more patients, and that's fantastic. We focused a lot on efficiency in the OR. Pioneers in surgery like Charlie Cook have really told us how many cases we can get done in a day, which is phenomenal. But that scarcity of resources in the office, really has a big impact on the staff as well as the patients. So, we're really trying to solve in the office for that scarcity of human resources that we have to take care of the patients. And then on the flip side of that, from the patient standpoint, we're really trying to improve quality and consistency of communications from the office. We've all suffered from staff turnover, lack of staff, training, inexperienced staff, staff that are shared amongst different providers. You get confused about the nuances of each provider's care. And with our product, what we're able to do is we're able to solve that scarcity by answering routine questions easily, quickly, accessible 24/7. But we're also able to improve the quality and consistency of those responses by training our product on each individual surgeon's preferences, practice patterns, and even on the patient level, patient nuances to the procedure they had done. So what we get in the end is a product really that solves the scarcity issue of human resources in the office to take care of patients in an efficient manner, but also alleviating patient anxiety by improving the quality of those responses they're getting to their questions.
One thing I find interesting about your solution is this juxtaposition of sort of familiar low tech interface, like using, SMS or WhatsApp, telehealth, powered by AI, something that's obviously in the news quite a bit and significantly more advanced. Is there something about that combination of technology that was important to you or that spoke to you as being the right tool to handle this problem?
Patient engagement platforms are nothing new. So there's a variety of different solutions out there on the market for engaging patients in their recovery. And the data demonstrates time and time again that patients do better if they feel invested in their care. So there is real value to these types of platforms. Unfortunately, I don't think we in the orthopedics field, in particular in the hip and knee arthroplasty realm, have seen significant uptake of those platforms. I've tried to use several in my practice in the past, and there's friction almost at every step of the way trying to get someone onboarded and actually engaged in using this product in a meaningful way. Once patients do get onboarded and they do engage, we see increased patient satisfaction. We see improved outcomes, things like reduced ER visits, benefits to payers as well as the patients. So our goal with using the AI portion of FIOS was really to create an AI first product from the ground up, nuts and bolts, to reduce the friction that patients go through when they onboard, to reduce the friction that providers experience when they're getting set up. So that combination of the future technology of AI and the past technology of SMS really is kind of the perfect poison here, that really gets us that frictionless experience for everyone. We use AI to assist with surgeon onboarding. We use AI to assist with patient onboarding, AI to assist with customization of the product, AI to assist with generation of the care pathways and customization of the care pathways, AI to assist with kind of the choose your own adventure features of the care pathways, where depending on how the patient is doing, they're not going to get a text message on post-op day 7 that's identical to the other person who's on post-op day 7, because those messages are going to be tailored based on how the patients are doing and their interaction with the product. We use the SMS because it's familiar. It doesn't require any downloading of apps. I remember trying to use some of these patient engagement platform applications, and you have the patient in the office very eager, wanting to get started, and it turns out that their grandson had set up their Apple account, and they can't download the app because they can't get on the phone with their grandson to figure out what their Apple password was. So by using SMS, it's familiar, it's frictionless. People are constantly checking their text messages throughout the day. It doesn't require opening another app. So again, all in the name of reducing friction, making this as easy as possible for both the provider side and the patient side, has led us to marry those two technologies, which we think is going to be a big win for our product.
So take me back a little bit more to the beginning of this process. You identify this need in your clinic. How do you begin turning your concept after having identified those gaps or identifying that need? How do you begin turning that concept into a real solution, a product that you can bring to market?
Like you alluded to, the first step in this process, in innovation, is really solidifying your problem that you're trying to solve for. Unfortunately, out there on the market, we see time and time again a lot of solutions developed looking for problems. I think it's important to start with that problem first and then work your way out from there. So once we identified that problem, once I identified that problem, the next step was really finding someone with the expertise who could help me develop that problem into a product. I'm a busy orthopedic surgeon. I've got minimal background in computer science, engineering. Even product development is my first real attempt at entrepreneurship. So I wanted to partner with someone who had experience in that realm. So my current business partner, CEO and co-founder, Professor Andrew McDade from New Zealand, serial entrepreneur, has taken several products to the market successfully in the past. And he was a longtime friend and someone who I'd worked with on previous projects for in a consulting manner. I went to him with my idea, and we helped really refine the problem, refine the product idea, and then from there, it's really about team building. Finding the different pieces of the team that you need, identifying the gaps in the expertise, and as the company grows, finding ways to both keep it tight, keep it lean. Of course, we're a startup, but also really leverage the expertise of each individual party to make the company successful.
When you and Andrew came together sort of as co-founders, you began bouncing ideas off each other. Obviously, you come with the orthopedic surgeon background, he comes with the PhD background. Were there unique perspectives that each of you brought to this problem that helped you to build FIOS into what it is today? How did coming together to work with somebody in a different industry or in a different area help you develop a stronger product?
It's a bit like putting a jigsaw puzzle together. So the pieces need to fit well. And I think Andrew and I luckily have a very good fit together. We disagree on a lot of things, which is fantastic because disagreement, I think, spawns new ideas, new solutions to problems. Myself, with the clinical background, I'm able to really assist on business development, on acquisition of clients, on marketing in the United States, on the product roadmap, identifying the key features I as a surgeon need, trialing the product, identifying pain points, in the product's current iteration, and really finding new ways to tackle that problem. Whereas Andrew, with his strong engineering background, entrepreneurial background, really was able to do a lot more on the back end for us in terms of organization of the company, identifying those key areas where we needed new team members to come in. And then, of course, on the product development side, being an expert in medical devices and artificial intelligence, was really able to help assemble the team on the back end that develops the product. Also really bring me down to earth. When I say I want a new feature, he's like, well, it'll cost this much, it'll take this much time. Maybe we should tackle this other thing first before we get there. So, overall, it's been a really, really good fit. But, for anyone wanting to start a company, I think it's very important to understand where your expertise is, understand where your gaps are, and then work with someone who's very complementary in their skill set, to really make sure that you're leveraging each other's skills appropriately and efficiently for the success of the company.
So you talked a little bit about what the product could do for you, right, during the development phase, things that you were interested in. Did you see at some point, did you have an idea or a vision for how FIOS Health could reshape sort of the relationship between the surgeon and the patient throughout this surgical experience? And if so, could you tell me a little bit about what that vision was and how it's evolved?
I think it's really important to be grounded in the initial problem you identify that you want to tackle with your company. And certainly we've been able to do that. But it's also important to have a long-term vision, a lofty goal, a pie in the sky, something you're really trying to change about the way, medicine is practiced. So, for me, my ultimate vision in creating FIOS Health was that one day I would be sitting in my office at a rich mahogany desk with a lot of leather band books behind me and have nobody else in the office with me other than the patient. Take it back to the old school days of medicine where you would physically bring the patient into your actual office, not into a clinic room, an exam room, no check-in people at the front desk, no one in the back office supporting the billing, surgical scheduler not sitting there having to talk to the patient, having the patient not have to go through this assembly line of people as they just want to see you in the office and talk to you about their complaints and get whatever it is they're there for taken care of. That was really my lofty vision, very real visual vision. To do that, there's a lot of moving parts. And basically, I wanted to use AI and technology to really replace all of those other people on the assembly line of that office visit, except for me. In doing that, you have to back up and say, what can I fix first? What's the approachable problem that I can fix first? Because you can't build a giant product like that right off the bat, and expect it to gain adoption, expect to survive as a company as you're trying to build and build and build. So the first thing we went after was answering patient questions. People already Google things, people already use ChatGPT for things. They go and search online, they thumb through your packet. We wanted to make all that information very approachable to the patient, very easily to access. The next step was patient care pathways. And now that we're getting beyond that, our next goal is really changing, like you mentioned, the patient provider relationship. Um, by reducing unnecessary follow-up visits, creating more of a holistic, continuous view of the patient's recovery instead of just generating that snapshot in time of the patient's recovery. So right now, as a surgeon, I find out about the patient immediately after surgery when I see them, post-op week number 2, post-op week number 6 or 8, and then I may not see them again for a year. With products like FIOS Health, we're able to develop continuous monitoring of the patient through both check-ins, patient-reported outcome measures, as well as biometric sensor data, and we can create, almost like a recovery score for that patient, that gives us a continuous view of how they're doing throughout the recovery. We can raise red flags and alerts if patients are doing poorly. We can congratulate them if they're doing well. We can make them feel like we're always watching them and caring for them, while at the same time not wasting their time coming to the office for a visit, and potentially opening up more time in our busy schedules to see more new patients to help more people with their problems they're having.
Were there challenges for you in making sort of a transition from being a master surgeon and an expert clinician in the operating room to being the chief medical officer and co-founder of essentially a technology company?
I have learned to use parts of my brain that I did not know exist, is the way I'll sum up my answer to that question. I'm a very visual person. That's why I love surgery, very hands-on physical. A company is a very abstract concept that, while it can exist on paper and exist in diagrams and flow charts and org charts, it is a very different experience being a part of a company, even a small startup, than being a surgeon. As a surgeon, we get very good at a couple things we do. We do them over and over and over again, reliably, reproducibly. Being a part of a company, it's a completely different pace. You kind of wake up in the morning and don't know what's coming next. You don't know where you should go next. You don't know how to drive the product. As a first time entrepreneur, I didn't know the different parts of a company that we needed to have. I didn't know we needed to have a marketing part, a sales part, a product development side. I didn't know all these different widgets and how they fit together. And it's been very rewarding learning about all those different ways the company has to function to really drive the success of the product.
So you mentioned your learning style, and obviously every clinician is going to learn a little bit differently. So how did you work to ensure that what FIOS Health was delivering well for you would also be able to sort of fit naturally into other clinicians' workflows as opposed to just adding some complexity that they weren't expecting?
This is where we get to the product market fit part, which is critical for any early stage company. It's easy to identify the problem. It's relatively easy nowadays to create a product, but it's very challenging to fine tune that product so it truly fits a need in the market. You need to create something that people don't want. You need to create something that they need. And in some cases, that need is something maybe that requires awareness. So educating providers why this product needs to be in their office, why patients need to be using it, why it's better than the status quo. I think is some of the challenging part of what you have to do if you're developing a new product. And really, I think we're creating a paradigm shift in the way patients are cared for. And you have to make sure providers understand that and are ready for it.
When you were building sort of your core team, how did you balance the need for bringing in clinical expertise, which is what you can offer, with some of that specialized technical expertise, not just for the development, but also for product marketing, for talking to other clinicians and creating that need within them?
We've been fortunate to have some excellent early partners, surgeon investor slash users that have had some skin in the game. So they've had some motivation to help us really fine tune the product, but they've also kind of been our test lab for product market fit. Since I'm the one driving a lot of the product development, it's easy for me to try to take the company in a certain direction that maybe isn't the right direction for other providers, other practice settings, other patients. So having those different voices on board early has been very important. And also really titrating how quickly we want to scale and get more customers versus trialing it with a few customers, making sure we get it right before we go out, maybe blow the opportunity with other providers if we haven't gotten it right. So a delicate balance there. In terms of sales, marketing, it's been a steep learning curve for me. I'm not used to going out and fundraising. It's very hard asking people for money, even when you really strongly believe in your product, like I do. So that's been quite a steep learning curve that I'm still going through, but I think I've gotten better as I've gone along.
So you talked about that focusing on individual sort of investor surgeons and investor clients versus, creating for a wider audience. That path to commercialization for FIOS Health, what does that look like now?
We're commercialized right now, so we have paying customers. We're in several clinics, some big name centers, and currently our goal is really to just grow the commercial base, grow the client base, and as we grow, take our customer feedback seriously, and really add in the features and functionality that surgeons and their patients need. We want this product to make surgeon lives easier and make patient recovery from surgery easier as well.
Asking a little bit on behalf of our listeners who may be new to FIOS Health, everybody who's an entrepreneur has developed an elevator pitch. What's your elevator pitch for FIOS Health? How would you describe what your platform does in 30 seconds?
FIOS Health is a med tech company focused on improving patient and provider lives through the strategic use of artificial intelligence. At FIOS, we deliver personalized, surgeon validated guidance to patients automatically in a frictionless experience via SMS or WhatsApp and improve outcomes and clinical efficiency. By automating routine communications, we reduce staff burnout, streamline clinical workflows, and give surgeons more time to focus on what matters most: high quality, personalized patient care.
Can you share a story that captures the real world difference that FIOS Health is making in patient care?
We haven't really dove into the deep features of the product, but that kind of has two functionalities right now. One of them is the patient facing application where patients interact with it. They get specific information from their providers' care pathways that they want followed. Um, so I've had patients tell me that they've used it. I've had patients tell me they felt like I was texting them. Because the answers feel warm, empathetic. I had one patient tell me that it saved them a trip to the ER because they were very nervous about something and they were texting back and forth with it, and it was able to answer all their questions right away. They didn't have to call the office. They didn't go to the urgent care of the ER. So hearing stories like that, is amazing. That's the patient facing side of the product. The provider facing side of the product, which we haven't talked about, is this is basically like an AI driven response platform for the clinic staff to log into. So the clinics can go in there, they can go through the patient messages and see what the patients are talking to the product about. You can even go in and fine tune the answers. So you can really train the model basically to be your digital twin in space. But what it also allows is it allows the medical assistants and the office staff to query your brain how you would want your patients taken care of. So if I've got a medical assistant in my office on desk duty and they're covering 3 or 4 different providers in the office and I'm one of them, they can select this patient belongs to Dr. Lawrie, and they have the patient on the phone and the patient's asking them a detailed question, how does Dr. Lawrie typically close his wounds? They don't have to thumb through a binder. They don't have to, find the document on the computer. They can just simply type into the box, how does Dr. Lawrie typically close his incisions? And boom, it'll spit it out right away. It'll show them where the knowledge came from with the resources. So they could either open that document up, find more information, or just take, the Dr. Lawrie closes with sub Q and feed that right back to the patient on the phone. So, hearing from the staff dissatisfaction with that portion of the product, as well as hearing the patients really satisfied with the rapidity with which they're receiving the information and the accuracy with which they're receiving the information and how it feels personalized and reduces their anxiety. I think hearing it from both sides has really been validating, that we're really onto something really great here with our product.
Were there any moments of doubt or course correction that maybe taught you something essential about either leadership or collaboration?
Early on, I think there was a bit of self-doubt almost on a daily basis. You're creating something new, you think it's gonna be great, you're not sure if it's gonna end up exactly the way that you envision it as it's being developed, because 'cause you're not the one actually doing the day-to-day development. Um, so, on a day-to-day basis, you're constantly wondering, "Is this product gonna turn out to be what I envision it to be?" As you get farther along, the self-doubt becomes, "Why is anyone using this?" I've talked to 3 people and all of them said, "No, thanks." Or, I pitched to 20 investors and every single one of them said, "Thanks for the call. We'll be in touch," and they don't follow up. So, it's not for the faint of heart going through this process. You really have to have strong conviction in the vision, in the problem you're trying to solve, and I think people around you can really sense whether or not you have that conviction.
If there was an essential piece of advice that you could give other practicing surgeons, or even if you could have given the younger Charles Lawrie, um, who've identified a problem, something that they want to solve that is a day to day issue in their practice, and they're now considering starting a company to solve it, what would that advice be?
So, my first bit of advice would be to start with a problem you live every day, not an abstract one. That's where you're going to be the most effective. Start with something in your wheelhouse, in your area of expertise. The best ideas come from the front lines. For us as surgeons, it's from the OR, it's from the clinic, it's from our interactions with staff and patients. It's not coming from a boardroom. The second thing would be once you've identified the problem, resist the urge to build in isolation. I think we're all used to being the captains of the ship. We're the team leaders for our surgical teams, for our clinic teams, for our patient care teams. This is not a time to be by yourself trying to do this on your own. You really need to surround yourself with people who know what you don't. That's the engineers, the designers, the data scientists, the marketeers. Really trying to use them and leverage their skill sets to bring your vision to light. Um, the third thing I would say is, build simple, right? We talked about having that lofty vision, the lofty goal, the light at the end of the tunnel, but that's unachievable at the beginning. So if you get yourself into this trap where you're not going to launch your product until you think it's perfect, you're never going to launch your product because it's never going to be perfect. You really have to define these series of checkpoints where you say, here's what I want my minimum viable product to look like. This is the point where I'm going to take it to market and really start working on that product market fit. Because if you don't do that, you're going to just develop forever. People are going to stop believing you, investing in you, and you're never going to have any customers. And finally, I would say don't be afraid to think big, but execute small, right? So pilot, iterate, fall flat on your face, fail a few times is what you're working on. Measure the impact that each of these versions of your product comes out with. Really be a scientist about it. Make this a research project. Figure out where you're winning, figure out where you're losing, and really titrate that to make the product, the best that you can. It's not doesn't have to be the best idea in the world. Doesn't have to be the most novel idea in the world. It just has to be one that actually works in practice. So, taking an existing product, taking something that's already out there that you don't think is working appropriately, and really tweaking it in a way that makes it much more approachable, much more easier to use, it could be a big winner. So, don't feel like you have to develop the next great technology of our century. Just small tweaks to existing things can really make a huge difference, and you may end up with a successful product that way.
As far as FIOS Health, what's next for it? What are the next big opportunities for growth or impact?
The simple answer, we're laser focused on moving beyond just being a great communication tool, and really being an essential intelligence layer for the entire clinic. I think our biggest opportunity here is to really evolve our AI from answering patient questions to becoming a comprehensive data driven assistant that fundamentally changes clinical workflows. It really becomes like the brain of the practice, the operation layer of the practice, where all the different moving parts, all the different people from the practice can interact with this platform in a very simple way to get the information they need at the time that they need it.
So our series is titled From Idea to Market. And for you personally, with the stage that FIOS Health is in its journey from idea to market, what does that phrase mean to you?
We're still a very young company, but that phrase brings a lot of memories to me because we're finally at the market end of that phrase, but it's only been 2 years we were at the idea portion of that phrase, drawing things down on napkins and having late night phone calls about different directions the company could go. So, it's been a very long yet short, arduous process. Um, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, late nights. So that phrase to me really brings me a lot of joy because it's rewarding to see the fruits of my labor having gone through the whole process now of taking an idea to market. And then I would just look forward to the next podcast series you run where you take it from market to global domination. And we can talk about it when I get to the end of that spectrum, Joe.